What's going on, coaches? Welcome to the Glass Note Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Wilbur, founder of the Coaches Site. Our producer is Justin Kwan. And I'm really excited for you to tune into my conversation with Scott Sandelin, head coach of the University of Minnesota Duluth Bulldogs. Really quick, though, I want to remind you that TCS Live, hockey's premier coaching conference, is set to return to the University of Michigan from June 22nd to 24th. Tickets are now on sale. And if you're a member of the Coaches Site, you will have received access to our members only pre-sale. It is the best offer you're going to get on tickets ever. So make sure you jump on that. And I can't wait to see you at the University of Michigan in June. It's going to be a blast. With that, on to my conversation with Scott Sandelin. Scott, good to see you.
Good to see you, Aaron. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Hey, did you see Neil Pionk's goal last night?
Yeah, it was a good night for some Bulldogs. Falk had a pretty good night. I saw both of Neil's goals, and it was fun. I think we had 7 guys playing last night in the 3 games, so it was flipping back between the channels trying to watch them all. So it was fun to see those guys doing well and scoring some goals.
Well, it was interesting. So we had the baseball game on, and my 3-year-old comes to me and he says, "Hey, can we watch a little hockey before bed?" We normally wouldn't see Colorado and Winnipeg out here on the West Coast, but we turned it on. There was 2 minutes left in the game, and it was, well, one, I had to explain what overtime was to a 3-year-old, so that was fun.
Yeah,
but it was interesting.
That was
good. Yeah. And but then it was interesting so Scott Arniel puts out Neil Pionk, Mason Appleton, and Adam Lowry. Colorado puts out Cale Makar, Nathan McKinnon, and I believe it was Rantanen. And so I'm watching this and I'm like, okay, this is by design. So they've got their 3-man unit out to try and, get through that first wave of Colorado players. And then they're probably going to roll, I don't know, Scheifele, Morrissey, and somebody else. And then Appleton makes a great play on the wall, and then Pionk comes down and absolutely rifles it. He's not somebody I would have assumed as a cannon for a shot.
No, it's a good thing it hit the net because it was a nice break the other way, which always happens in 3-on-3, right? Miss the net, and next thing you know, it's going the other way. But yeah, he had a goal earlier where it wasn't quite as heavy, but yeah, that one got in there quick. Probably surprised him a little bit too.
Well, I'm assuming that a lot of these former Bulldogs, when they're going down off the rush, they probably hear like Coach Sandelin's voice in their ear telling them to hit the net or, stick to the details. You mentioned, I believe it was 7 players, former Bulldogs playing last night, 12 former Bulldogs on opening night rosters this year. And I believe the number is 18 players from your program since 2018 have made their way into the National Hockey League. What I find really interesting is 4 of those players, or 4 of the current players, made it as free agents. So you've got Carson Kuhlman in Seattle, Jackson Cates, I believe, is in Philly, Neil Pionk in Winnipeg, Alex Iafallo, who just in researching this didn't appreciate what a heck of a career he's made for himself. These players, like, just recognizing how hard it is to, step foot in that league, let alone as a free agent. Anything that stood out to those players while they were spending time in your program that would point to the success they're having today?
They were everydayers, Aaron. I mean, they came to work every day. They were a pleasure, to coach because you didn't have to tell them a lot of things, and they wanted to get better. But just the example every day, and you hear that a lot with some of those players, the everyday guys, and from a coach's side of it, you love those players. You wish you had 26 or 28, or whatever your number is, but that also, you don't have that all the time, which is why you coach, right? Because there's different challenges. But no, those guys are everydayers, and more important, great people. Like they were, they loved to come to the rink. They had a smile on their face, and they just worked and wanted to get better at what they were doing. So it was no surprise that they're actually, having success at the next level.
You've got 10 freshman players on this year's edition of the Bulldogs. How do you bring those players into your program so that there's a high likelihood that they're going to become everydayers?
I think it started back in May when we had them come for, a period of time to be with our returners. I know every team does that. We had our guys come back for a week and get acclimated to each other and train and just spend some time. Whether it was golfing, whether it was playing basketball, whatever they were doing. They got to know each other, which we haven't been able to do a whole lot of because of the COVID stuff in the
Sure.
previous years. So this was kind of nice for everybody to kind of get to know each other. So that helps kind of get that comfort level, at a good spot before they come back for school. And you obviously lean on your older guys to continue to set that example. I think our leadership group has, been around and we've got some guys like Tanner Latteru, who's been here for 5 years, who's our captain, who's won a championship. We're running out of those guys. They're slowly leaving the program, but just guys that have had a lot of those experiences and just kind of pointing those guys in the right direction and making sure there's communication and just following up on certainly our coaches' messages too to just make sure they know kind of what's expected. And obviously that's still a growth thing for those players as we get into the practices, whether it's September or now. They're still learning, but our older guys have done a really good job in making those guys, number one, feel comfortable, and two, kind of let them know what's expected.
I would think that with that many new faces, that there's a process, at this stage with your team where you're trying to establish, I don't want to say a pecking order, but just where players fit, what roles they might play. How do you allow that process to unfold in a healthy way so it benefits the team in the long run versus perhaps, creating a bit of division?
Yeah, I've gone through it a couple of times with big freshman groups and younger players, and I'm not a patient guy, but you do have to have some patience. I think that's we need games too, and it's even talking to our media the other day. I said, we've got only four pages to a chapter with this group right now, and
Yeah, great way to
we
put it.
need some more pages to kind of really get a feel. Like, we recruit these players and we watch them play, but to be around them every day, and learn their habits and learn them a little bit more as people, I think is really important. So just spending some time with those guys every day or during the week, whether it's 5 minutes on the rink or off the rink, just kind of picking their brain too. And now that we've played some games, just kind of getting them to assess what they feel too, how they've played or what things they can do better. And just so we understand their thinking. It's easy for a coach to say this and that, but I think it's really important to get the understanding of the player so that you kind of get on the same page and you can work towards, you know, the future and making them better and hopefully that's the thing that works. But again, there's a lot of guys, and again, we're still learning. But I kind of looked at this first month with all the non-conference as kind of a good learning and measuring stick for our group to kind of get to know them and see kind of where we are in different situations. And like I said, games are huge for that.
What do you look for? I mean, obviously, it's great for a young player to come in and score a goal early, gain some confidence, etc. But what would be examples of some of the other details or habits that would signal to you that a player is making progress or is perhaps in a position to contribute in a bigger way?
Yeah, I think again it goes back to kind of the daily. Again how they practice. I mean, the one nice thing about college is we have a lot of practice time, but it's really important to take advantage of that. So I think just getting into good work habits, good practice habits, obviously paying attention to the details. It's so funny because we have a long month of September and you think you're getting a lot done, but again, I still go back to you need games and you need to be in game situations. So I just think to start with those players, I always kind of use the term like everyone has a noose, but it's really loose, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes it gets tightened, and sometimes you just got to let them run a little bit and make mistakes and learn from that too. So especially with younger guys, I think you got to just let them grow into kind of what they're going to be, and you're going to have to live with some mistakes here and there. But the nice thing is, we can keep putting them back out there. We can sit them a game if we've got some good depth, and they can learn from that too. So there's all good learning lessons, both ways. So, but biggest thing is coming to work every day, bringing that that work helmet and that lunchbox, and that's kind of been our mo with our teams over the years. So hopefully, guys, buy into that and continue to to represent that every day in practice.
I think one of the interesting developments in our sport is when we talk about competitiveness and work ethic. I think one of the ways that there was a time in our game where coaches nurtured that in drills with no pucks and utilizing the lines on the ice to try and maybe build some accountability and competitiveness. But that's changed. Like just as you've been at Duluth now for over 20 years. Like just looking at your own sort of coaching evolution, like how have you best learned to develop competitiveness within your team, but also just players individually in practice?
Yeah, I think for me too, I always, I'm never satisfied. I don't like complacency. And we've been fortunate to win a few championships, but I don't ever want to get complacent. I think I'll be out of coaching if I do that because I love the challenges of either trying to repeat or trying to get back there and do it again. And it's the same thing with players, right? I think that's why we love to coach is those challenges of trying to get guys in your program and make them better. And part of that's learning what makes them, go a little bit, whether it's the pat on the back, whether it's the hardness. And that takes time but, again, the compete is such a big thing. And, I don't ever want to lose that.
No, well said. Well said. You touched on just before we hit record here. Practice today. You were working on
Mm-hmm.
the power play. This is an area where I think the power play can be one of those aspects of practice as a coach where it's challenging in the sense that you can have a lot of players sitting around. You obviously have the players that maybe aren't taking part in the drill, and it's not always fun being on the other side of the rink. How have you structured that within your practice? Like, how do you teach that, and how do you keep it? Is it just 5-on-0 sort of running static plays? Is it live environments? What's the best way to get your players connected?
We do a little bit of everything. I think I do think you need the 5-on-0. You need obviously you need some killers, and you need some pressure in certain situations, whether you're working on breakouts or in zone. Same thing with face-offs. But I do think making sure that you're moving pucks crisply. I think I've done even like World Juniors, right? You always worry about doing 5-on-4 because you're worried about injuries, right? And I still
Yeah.
do. You still worry about that a little bit too here, and when you're doing live, but you have to do it, right? And so we mix in a little bit of everything. I've got a new assistant, Cody Chupp. He's brought some new ideas too, so that's good. And he's brought in some different drills that we can do. But I like to keep it fresh. It's no different than practice. I think sometimes things get really stale, and guys that have been here, if you're doing kind of the same thing, even though repetition is good because you really figure out if you're getting better at certain drills. But I think it's the same thing with the power play, just trying to keep it a little bit fresh. And early in the year, we'll do power play scrimmage with everybody, just to you kind of have an idea who your power play guys are, but some of those guys are your killers too. So we'll have a good competitive power play scrimmage where, we'll do two kind of halves or break it into 8-minute segments and kind of rotate one group on the power play, one on the penalty kill, vice versa. So the guys really like that, and I think it gives us an idea too, and a viewing on on some different players too. It seems like all the guys that are not maybe going to be on your power play always seem to be pretty good, right?
Yeah.
And so it makes you think a little bit. But all these guys have played, in those situations where they're coming from. So it's good to get a look at different guys too. But we try and keep it fresh.
You mentioned Cody Chupp, who's new to your staff, and obviously he's there because Derek Plant goes to Chicago, and we touch on the amount of players that you've moved on to the National Hockey League and pro hockey, but then I mean, man, it's been remarkable the amount of coaches you've moved on as well. So in addition to Derek, Steve Rolick is the head coach at Ohio State University. Brett Larson is down at St. Cloud. But maybe just looking at, in the case of Cody, when you're um, hiring somebody for your staff, and I think it's interesting too. I believe all three of those other coaches played at Duluth. Cody played at Ferris State. What do you look for? What makes a good addition to your staff?
Well, I think it's someone that you look at your weaknesses too, and someone that can strengthen that or can bring some different things, right? I think having different personalities is important. Now I've coached long enough where I have a little bit bigger pool of alumni
Yeah.
to pull from, right? And obviously, Adam Kraus is here now in his fifth year as my associate head coach, which is a former captain and player. But there are some guys out there. Brendan Kotick, who played here, is coaching in South Carolina. So there are guys that played here that are alums that are coaching. But I like to look at alumni first if they're the right person. But I think it's somebody that complements you. I think and complements your staff. And obviously, when we hired Cody, I talked a lot with Adam, just like I did when we were in hiring positions before. You talk extensively with your assistant coach because those guys work very closely together. We all do, but those guys spend a lot of time, on the road and just different things. So I think getting those people that are compatible, and I've been very blessed to have some great assistant coaches here that have helped me tremendously. I've learned a lot from them. Hopefully they've learned from me, and some are on to bigger and better things. So it's great to see that, but they're good people first. That's got to be, first and foremost, because like my wife says, you better love them because you spend a lot of time with them. So,
No kidding.
so it is fun to have good people. And like I said, I've been very fortunate to have some great assistants and great people to work with here.
So, like we said, I mean, you've been at Duluth for a while now, but for these assistant coaches that are with you, and obviously they're looking to run their own programs or move on in their careers. What advice have you given them in terms of when they're ready to make that jump? It's obviously a step that you went through coming from North Dakota, but and maybe just in general to any young coach there, be it an assistant coach at the collegiate level or at some other stop in their career. How do you think about making that next step? Because we also see examples where coaches aren't ready, and that can work against you as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I took the Duluth job, I was with Dean Blaze at North Dakota for 6 years, and and I learned a lot from him as far as giving me a lot of responsibility to prepare myself to maybe be in that position. But even when I got the job, Aaron, I'll be honest with you, I thought I was ready. I probably wasn't as ready as I thought. There's a lot of things that go with being a head coach versus an assistant coach. There's a lot of administrative things. There's things that I never had to deal with when I was an assistant, but those things come into play. It's obviously something that you grow into, and now having been doing it for a long time, I know for sure I'm a much better coach, and I can handle those things a lot better than I did before. But just trying to really let those guys know, and I try and do that with my assistants, is try and give them a lot of autonomy on things. I want them to grow. I want them to learn about whether it's the budget, whether it's travel, whether it's whatever things. I think guys that really want to learn that stuff do get a leg up as far as maybe that
Yeah.
opportunity to coach at the next thing. The hockey's the hockey, but there are other things. There's commitments and the media and how to deal with the media and things like that. Obviously, I've learned a few things over the years, but there's a lot of things that go into it. And trying to put those guys in those positions as part of your staff, I think, is what I try and do here, so that those guys maybe are a little more prepared for the next step.
One of the most important things to anyone, especially competitive athletes, is feedback. No one wants to hear a great game all the time. They want to know why they played well or why they didn't. And Power Play is a very good platform for this because it encapsulates many of the areas of the performance spectrum. Now, a player might have gone pointless in a game, but a coach can watch that player's shifts and then say to that player, hey, you scored 4 goals, you were on the ice for 3, and you made a really good play that helped us get into a scoring situation, and that is really important for our team. A player who played hard and smart in a game might not show up on the scoreboard, but the analytics folks might think he was the best player in that game, and we need to make sure that we can assess those areas of a player's game and provide that feedback to him or her. Practice is also an area where coaches can generate a lot of dialogue with players. How you practice is how you play, and many good youth hockey coaches have found a way to film practice, review it, and give feedback regarding work ethic, execution, and compete level. Power Player has metrics for all of this, as well as a great area for using video, which to me is the best teaching tool we have and which I utilized a ton on this platform. Power Player allows coaches to reach a greater number of players on a larger number of topics in a way that today's young athlete needs and understands.
So you mentioned your 6 years at North Dakota on Dean Blaze's staff, who I believe recruited you originally as a high school player as well. But I want to dive into that relationship and that experience. But the first thing I do before any of these conversations, so I've got a window open up on my computer right now. And the first tab of every one of these conversations is I pull up the guest elite prospects profile. So I'm looking at your elite prospects profile. I see the 6 years at North Dakota. And then before that, 93, 94, you're with the Fargo Moorhead Junior Kings. But then the year before that, in 92, 93, you're with the team called the Fargo Moorhead Express of the AMHA. You were the coach GM. I can't find that league anymore. What
didn't last very long.
Tell us about your first year as a coach.
Yeah, it was interesting. So I finished playing 91, 92 in Minnesota with Minnesota, and obviously played most of the time in Kalamazoo. And I hurt my back, and so I didn't know if I needed surgery or not. So that was actually the year Tampa Bay came into the league, and they were interested in me, but then they found out about my back, and so did everybody else. So I was kind of in there. We had just gotten married. My wife and I just got married. I don't really have a job, so we're like, what do we do?
Great start.
I had some opportunities to go to Europe. Donnie Knockbauer, who I played with, was trying to get me over to Austria a couple of years in a row, but I didn't go, and had some chances to go to some pro camps without a contract. And being around in the league for 6 years, you know that that's not an easy thing to make a team without a contract. But I was at a camp in Grand Forks, a pro camp, and I was just skating and my back went out, and I literally crawled off the rink.
Wow.
Brad Barry was also at the camp. Brad, obviously, we played together at North Dakota and in Kalamazoo, and I stayed at Brad. I think I stayed on Brad's, air mattress for a couple days, and kind of realized I'm like, yeah, maybe I'm not going to play. So anyway, long story short, I got wind of this league that there was three gentlemen that were starting this league, and I was like, okay. My wife and I were going to live in Minneapolis. She was a nurse, and so I'm like, okay, I'll coach the St. Paul team. So I actually had the job in St. Paul, and then about a week into it, Dave Langevin wanted to coach in St. Paul, and so they called me and said, well, we want you to go to Fargo. I said, well, I'm already working. So I've been working for a week for St. Paul, and well, we really want you to go to Fargo because of your connections to North Dakota. And I said, but I already have a job. So anyway, long story short, again, I ended up going to Fargo, which was great because I knew a lot of people and coached there. And the league was quite interesting. I was on the phone a lot. It was like dial a team. It was like trying to get softball and calling guys you want to play on the weekend. But I ended up finding a pretty good team. Got some help from some agents. Had a couple Russian players. One that played 3 or 4 games in Edmonton. Scott Koberinsky, a teammate of mine in North Dakota, was playing over in Europe. I got him back as a player coach and had a really good team. And I think we would have done even better had the league not folded. But it lasted about 3 months.
No kidding.
I think we were tied with St. Paul for first place after 30 games. And then it folded, and then it was like, what do you do now? And so I was living in Fargo and got to know some doctors and actually got involved with the hockey treadmill, the skating treadmill there because that was Mark Verpeer was there and kind of was the developer of that. So I got into that, and then I actually coached. There was a junior B team there that I also coached along with the treadmill, just to get back into coaching. So that lasted a year, and then Dean got the job in North Dakota and called me and brought me along, and so it was a couple years in Fargo, and some good learning experiences. Coaching GM was interesting, Aaron, because I was just a player and guys all want a lot of money, and we were trying to deal with a
I
salary cap
bet,
that
yeah.
wasn't really realistic. So it was interesting to kind of go through that.
Well, I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes at the time. So you mentioned you're newly married, and I mean, you've been around hockey at this point. So I mean, I'm sure it would have dawned on you that this isn't the most stable profession.
Yeah.
Like, what about that experience gave you the comp? Say, hey, like this is the road I want to try and go down, and jump in at North Dakota and go on that ride.
You know, I realized I really wouldn't mind coaching back when I was helping at hockey camps and working with those players. I just really enjoyed that. Oh, again, there were some challenges with some of those kids at those hockey camps, but it was just fun. And I think, once I had the injury and you're sitting there kind of going, geez, what am I going to do? I mean, I was fortunate. I got a college degree, so I had that in my hand, but I'm like, I don't want to get out of the game. I'm 28 years old. Do I go get surgery and then try and play again? And then kind of this came up, and so I'm like, yeah, I'll try that coaching, and I really enjoyed that part of it. I know I said the salary cap was interesting, but the second year there with that junior B team, basically those players, I think we had two players from that team play Division III hockey, so it wasn't this all Division I type players. It was kind of your above average players that just wanted to play, and I really got a lot out of that year. I mean, I'm driving a van with a trailer and we're going, but it was just fun. And you know what, that year really kind of, I'm like, I want to keep doing this, and this was fun. And then the timing was right with Dean getting the job at North Dakota and me getting an opportunity to go back and work for him.
So, with that relation with Dean, so you guys, I believe you win the national championship in '97. Um, when you look at your program today and just perhaps how you oversee the program as a coach, what part of say Dean or that experience of North Dakota has stuck with you?
I think a lot. I mean, I think the demand, the work, the expectation to win. He was such a competitive guy, not just a coach, just person. I don't care what we're doing, but just that competitiveness. Like, he was always a guy for me, whether I played for him or coached with him. I never want to let him down. Like, I thought that much. Like, you just didn't want to let him down, and he had the soft side too, but he could be firm. But I think that's something I learned there. I think I tried to take a little bit of everything from different coaches that I've played for. And I think one of the biggest, probably best advice I got was, don't try and emulate, just because that's what worked at North Dakota, it's going to work for you. So you got to take a little bit and you kind of got to grow into that. But there's a lot of things that I like, just with the conditioning, making sure guys are in good shape, making sure guys are competing hard, making sure that, you know, a little thing like when the freshmen come in, that they're welcomed into your program and they are made to feel a part of it quickly. There's a lot of things too that I learned from him, and that I have carried over. And the unique thing about the championships, even the 2011 one here, as soon as we won, I talked to Dean about a day or two later, and I said, it's funny how um, it was eerily similar to 2000 or the 97, right? It wasn't expected, but there's just the similarities in how I think 97 Michigan had that loaded team with Morrison
Yeah.
and all those guys, and they got beat. And, I think in 11, if you look at it, North Dakota was really loaded that year, and Michigan beat them 2-0, and we ended up playing Michigan in the final. So, like, the favorites kind of got bumped out, and that's college hockey. And so it's amazing how all of them have kind of paralleled, right? There's been a lot of similarities between even the championships I was a part of as a coach at North Dakota, and, a couple of them here. So it's kind of unique.
I want to go back to something you just said about welcoming. You want to make sure that the freshman players are welcomed into your program. And so, like, literally just last night, I'm reading Bill Walsh's book, The Score Takes Care of Itself. And he points out that when he took over the San Francisco 49ers, one of the first things he did is he said, there's no more hazing. Like when a player comes here, they're one of us, and we treat them as equals. And that was something that he really believed in. And I'm just curious, is that something that has evolved over time for you, that just maybe recognizing the benefit of that, or was that something that you took from somewhere, just and recognize that, hey, this is the right way to do it or the best way to do it?
You know, I think it's certainly something I saw a little bit when I was there. It wasn't a lot. Just there was a couple situations that I didn't like because I was an assistant coach, and I'm like, okay, I either got to deal with this or I'm going to have to tell the boss, right?
Yeah.
And so you recruit all these players, you build relationships with them. But it was interesting because there was a day like a couple freshmen walked in and they weren't skating with the older guys, and I'm like, well, why aren't you out there? Well, they said, to skate after us. And I'm like, okay. So then I kind of clued in. I'm like, okay, this is not going to happen. So we got that remedied quick. But, it's different now too. Like I said, we had our guys in, earlier in the summer. Some teams now have players stay for 4 or 6 weeks or whatever. So I don't think we never had to do that before, right? Guys
Yeah.
just showed up on campus and, you're going to school and you start playing and you're meeting guys kind of for the first time. And now it's that those relationships are kind of being built a little bit before that for probably those exact reasons. So you kind of become more familiar with each other. You kind of bond a little bit and you can grow as a team a little bit quicker because those relationships are already formed.
No, that makes total sense, and I just think that, if coaches take one thing out of this conversation, I think that's an important one to jot down. Your first national championship in 2011. So you come to Duluth um, in the 2001 season. You win 3 games your first year. Things start trending up for about 5 seasons, and then in 2005 there's a bit of a dip again, and then but then in 2009 the program seems to, you see that hockey stick curve in the win column. And I'm just curious, when you look at, the 2011 team, and if you work backwards, like at what point were maybe the seeds planted that led to that championship?
I think 2008, 2009, the 2009 year, like we had a meeting as a coaching staff, and we decided to kind of change our recruiting a little bit, just because we were getting players, and they might be draft picks, but they weren't maybe guys that were high end draft picks, but also we wanted to build around some players. So that's when the guys like Jack Conley, Mike Conley, we got from Camrose, Justin Fontaine, some undersized guys that had a ton of skill that we felt we need some of these guys. We don't care if they're draft picks or not. We don't care if they play pro, but they can be great college players. And you can build around those guys. And that's kind of where we made the shift. And those guys came in, and obviously, that's where it kind of changed. Like we had some great players. We had Mason Raymond and Matt
Yeah.
Niskanen, and we had some really good players, but we didn't have maybe enough of a certain type of player. And we just kind of said, we're going to change here, and we got those guys in, and we've kind of grown from there. And those guys grew into winning the championship together, and we've kind of kind of gone on from there. So it's been really helpful, and it just obviously we want to keep it going, but that's not an easy task in today's world when
Oh man.
you're losing players early, and you're seeing it with a lot of the programs, top programs. It's hard to sustain that. So we feel really good about the fact that we've been able to kind of hang in there and get to the tournament 7 years in a row, and certainly the being in the Frozen Four, those opportunities, and winning a few times, because it's really difficult. It's really difficult.
Well, I want to dive into the most recent championships as well, in particular the shift in recruiting philosophy. But one of my most valuable lessons as a coach. So uh, I was coaching at UBC. We came down to play. I believe it was you and St. Cloud. So this would have been the start of the 2009 season. I believe this was the last year in your old rink, and so small ice surface. So our team, a lot of ex Western Leaguers. We were big, we were tough, and the bus rolls in, and we walk into the rink, and you guys are practicing, and I can just see our players, and you guys didn't have a very big team, and our guys are like, we're gonna kick the shit out of these guys tonight because they're smaller, and we're just gonna. And our whole game plan, like we're in the dressing room, we're like, just keep the puck on the wall. We're gonna grind it out, and we're gonna be in great shape. And then the puck drops, and we wouldn't have had the analytics back then, but if I was going to guess, you probably had the puck on your stick 45 minutes of a 60-minute game, and we're pulling our hair out. We're like, how is this happening? Like, we're doing exactly what we want. We're keeping the puck on the wall. And I can remember getting on the bus. We had to drive back. I think we were staying in St. Cloud, and we had to drive back, and I've got the video open. And the Mike Connollys and Justin Fontaine's, these guys, and they're small, like they're all under like 5'9". I think that's fair. They're going in against these bigger guys, and they're getting their shoulder inside their equipment. And right as they get to the wall, they're lifting sticks. So of course, as soon as you're going into a wall with speed, you stand up. So you're kind of useless. And these players are they're taking the puck, they're curling away. And it was just time and time and time again. And I remember showing our coach, I'm like we got beat at a chess match, man. So my question is this: when you're assembling your team like that, and you want to be competitive, obviously, winning a national championship at any level, there's a grind, there's a physical price to pay. Are these skills that the players already had in their back pocket, or is this something that as a staff that you're saying, hey, we're going to go after these types of players, but we've got to give them these tools so they can be successful in big games?
I think some have those, and that's why they were here. Some, I think, probably learn some things like every player does wherever they go. So like a player like you mentioned, Mike Conley. I think Mike Conley was one of the best players I've ever coached. He's probably one of the toughest kids for his size I've ever coached. But again, that type of mentality, that type of mindset was really important for us. Now, Jack Conley didn't play like Mike Conley. Jack Conley was a different type of player, but again, extremely competitive, really good brain. I mean, those guys. It was fun to have some guys like that had great hockey IQs to go with the skills and the compete level. And some guys took a while to get there, but again, when you're in that environment, I think it kind of rubs off on players, and some guys pick it up quicker, and some guys don't pick it up. You hope they do, but for the most part, those guys had a lot of that in them, and we were just trying to refine it and hopefully teach them a few more things.
Jumping ahead to your second national championship, so in 2018, you get into the tournament. So you got to win 4 consecutive games to carry a trophy around the ice. You beat Minnesota State 3-2, Air Force 2-1, Ohio State 2-1, and then Notre Dame 2-1. What do you know about playing in tight games?
Well, I knew. Well, that was a really interesting year too, because that was the year we had all the 5 freshman D, and that was the Perunovich and Sandberg and those guys. And at Christmas time, we were not in a good spot, but again, it was part of that growth, and those guys picked it up, and we got lucky by some things happening for us to get in, and everyone still talks about that .0001, but I know we were sweating on the bus until we got back, and I think Notre Dame beat Ohio State, which helped us get in. But that group and some of the, well, put it this way, a lot of the groups and teams that I had that were part of those successful years and championship years, they loved those moments. They were great in tight games. We played in so many of them. The 11 year, I think we had, I don't know, maybe 11 overtime games.
Wow.
So they were comfortable going to overtime. We had success in overtime, so it wasn't new to them. Just like this year was, that year was that you're talking about is, just learning how to play in those 1-goal games. And so our guys, the demeanor never changed. That's what I loved about those groups. We could be up or down, and you wouldn't know the difference, and they just kept playing, and it showed great resiliency, and I think that was really a trademark of that team, just like a lot of the other teams.
Do you, when you're trying to get your thumb on the pulse of a group, um, has there been anything in hindsight you've looked back on those teams? And I mean, you've had a lot of great teams, a lot of great players, but is there anything in particular that you look back on and say, you know what, there was something unique about that group that started to come through at a point in the season, or that lets you know that you had a shot?
Some That's a great question, Aaron, because I think I think there's probably been a lot of the groups where I'm like, I don't know what the hell we're getting right now, right? I don't, and
Yeah.
I do know that in 19 though, when Parker Mackay was our captain, it was a really interesting group. They're very quiet. They practiced well, but just I just feel like I'm like, oh my god, I don't know if we're ready or not. But I learned one thing at the end is that we had a really good captain, and he had the room. So like whatever was going on the ice, um, he had the room. And I could probably say the same thing about Carson Kuhlman in 18 and Jack Conley in 11, but more so 18, 19. But that was really, I remember talking to Parker after, and I just said, the one thing I realized is no matter what was going on the ice, you had that room and you had those guys ready to go. And that's as a coach, when you appreciate leadership like that, it makes your job a lot easier. Because yeah, there were a lot of days I'd go home and I tell my wife, I don't know where we're at. I don't know if we're going to win. I don't know if we're ready to play. And but that group just kept finding a way, and Parker had a huge hand in that. So that was probably one thing that I learned that year.
You also mentioned that the team was I think you said it was a good. They practiced well. In your experience, if you were to look at all your teams and where they how they perform during practice, can you draw a direct line to, I guess, the teams that end up being really successful? And I guess what I mean by that is is that, do you need that baseline of a team that just maybe practices a little bit, can raise their level a little bit more, to reach the pinnacle?
Yeah, a little bit. I think you know what. I think there's been groups that maybe haven't maybe practiced as well that still have had some success. But I think it gives you more of a consistency line of
Sure.
kind of how you are. And the thing in college, like even as a coach, you tend to forget, like we want these kids in their minds and their focus here every day, but they're still going to class. They got a lot of things going on in their life. There's a lot of distractions. As a coach, like when they're there, you expect them to, you know, there's a standard, right? And I know players have standards too, but sometimes those things creep in there, and as a coach, you tend to forget about that. And then you got to kind of catch yourself and go, that's finals week, and right, they've been studying, and maybe they're a little tired mentally, and so you got to take some of those things into account too. And Will Francis last year, Will's going through chemo, and
Yeah.
sometimes you forget about how he reacts to that, and you're like, God, why is he lagging behind? And part of it was that, but you catch yourself as a coach going, oh, that's why, right? And or you try and prepare yourself for some of that stuff based on maybe what the week is, or school, or like I said, exams, or whatever. So there's all that part of it too. So it's interesting to kind of juggle that.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, you know what's you, we just hosted the college hockey Inc. virtual coaching clinic we do, and it's great. We get to shine a spotlight on some of the great coaches at your level, and through that, I got to interview Jerry York, and last year got to do Red Berenson and Jack Parker together. Um, and one thing that's really stood out to me is, there seems to be this philosophy in a profession where it seems like everybody's scrambling to climb the ladder as quickly as possible, that there's um, a real desire and passion to mold people, as much as there is about winning hockey games. And Scott, I didn't know you when you first took over at Minnesota Duluth. My gut tells me you're just as competitive and passionate today as you were back then. And that's not easy. I mean, you talk about being complacent. I think it's human nature to be doing something as long as you've been doing. That human nature would say you become complacent eventually. How have you just signed a new 2-year extension? Um, is there a process you go through to get yourself up for each season, or does it just happen naturally? Like, how do you got the same juice when you're driving to the rink each morning?
I do. And the fun part too is like I've always said change is good, and sometimes when there's turnover on your staff, you get a new member on your staff, assistant coach. Maybe like when Adam came in, right? It was exciting for me to kind of go, okay, now I can. I know I know we had another assistant here, but like it's fun to I can now I can kind of help him too, and I can get involved there. And you don't get complacent with recruiting, right? So it's like now you get back in there. So I think those changes are good, but I love the challenges every year of kind of molding a new team. Every team can take on a different identity, and like I said, I've seen it happen to coaches. And sometimes it's been there, right? Maybe I'm not going to sit here and say there hasn't been any complacency, but sometimes it creeps in and you don't even know about it. And we kind of addressed that this year as a staff. Like, we just said, our standards, we feel like maybe through the COVID in the last couple of years, maybe we've slipped a little bit, and we got to get it back up there. And that's everybody from myself all the way down to our athletic trainers, equipment managers, assistant student managers. Everybody just we need to raise that standard and don't let things slip. So, um, but usually every August, middle of August, I start you know, getting that feeling again. The season's coming, but I think as I've gotten older, I've learned to try and get away from it more in the summer. And that's hard in college because we're recruiting still. So, but I still like,
Especially
you
now,
love
yeah.
that part. But, it's not like a pro coach where you're going and you can go spend 6 weeks at your lake home and kind of get away from it that way. So we're still out on the road and we all share that. And that's still fun to do. But you still got to find time to kind of decompress a little bit. And um, I've tried to do that a little bit more. Even through the year, try and take maybe a Sunday, even if you like last weekend we lose 2 games, right? Just I'm not happy. You want to kind of find answers, but just to kind of make it a family day, right? Just kind of get back at it on Monday and trying to find times like that to keep that part of it still human. And but I love it. I mean, I love it, and you know, I always joke with Adam because he's a millennial. So I said, I needed to hire you because you know how to handle these guys. But I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot, and I've learned to be a lot more flexible. And I think the ability and the willingness to change a little bit as a coach, I think, has probably helped keep me going. So it's been fun.
Well, just looking at your last weekend, so you guys open the season at home, you sweep ASU, and then you go down the road to Mankato, where your son Ryan plays, and Friday night, 6-0 loss, so that's not fun. And then you come back the next night on Saturday and you lose 2-1. It was interesting your comments in the paper afterwards where you seem to find that silver lining that just pointing out that your team competed a lot better, that there was a step, that there was a young group, that there was a step that was taken. Is that a reaction you would have had early on in your career? Is that sort of learned to maybe, just in the same way that you would take advantage of that Sunday and make it a family day, to sort of maybe step back and say, okay, let's take a 30,000-foot view and find the positives?
I would have probably been really, really super pissed off early in my career
Yeah.
because but again, I'm looking at the group, right? And again, we talk about kind of going through the process. It was our first road trip. We've been at home a lot. It's a tough building to win, and I think they've only lost 5 times in the last 80 games there. Obviously a good hockey team. So, what I tried to do through the week was go, hey guys, this is going to be exciting. I mean, the building's going to be sold out. A good team, first road series. We all get to go on the road together. It's great, right? And we go out and start the first 5 minutes good, and then next thing you know, it could have been worse than that. Actually, it was actually 7. They disallowed a goal. So, but you walk out of there going, but we knew what, we kind of knew what we did wrong, right, as a coaching staff. So just kind of go back to showing some video, maybe a little longer video session than maybe normal, but just making sure we hammer the points home. And our older guys, our captains, the Tanners, the Lowheights, the Quinn Olsons, we're talking about the same thing. So, and I truly tried to get them to focus on how we need to play and not, we got to win. We got to win the second game, right? Because sometimes you get so caught up and you got to win that you forget about what you need to do to win. So we just talked about, let's do this better. Let's compete harder. Let's manage the puck better, do those things. And we did. And you know what? We did. We, unfortunately, our special teams, didn't fare very well. So that was a difference. But it was an excellent hockey game. It was probably what I think everybody was expecting both nights. The shots were like 17-16, so there wasn't a lot of room on the rink, and chances were at a minimum. So, but I wanted to see how we'd respond, right? Are we going to roll over? Are we going to feel sorry for ourselves, or are we going to get back at it and get to work? And our guys got back at it and got to work. So I said, let's build on that this week and have a good weekend this weekend.
Well, and speaking of this weekend, you got Wisconsin coming to town, which, geographically seems like they should be a conference rival, but they're not. They're in the Big Ten. But I got to think this is if I'm a fan of the Duluth Bulldogs, this is a weekend I circle on my calendar. Can you paint a picture what game night's like at Amsoil Arena, particularly for a series like the one you have coming up?
Yeah, people are excited. They haven't been here, since the league split up, right? Obviously, they were a big rival in the WCHA for us. The Wisconsin fans love coming to Duluth. Our fans love going there, just like when we had Minnesota. But they haven't been here since 2012. Would have been earlier, but the COVID. So anyway, I think there's a lot of our fans that love the WCHA and love watching Wisconsin come to town are really excited. So I think it'll be a fun building. Our student section's been awesome. You're going to have 12 to 1,500 students at the one end. So hopefully Wisconsin brings some fans here too. And usually they've traveled well, but maybe not as much lately. I hope that they can get some people here too. But it'll be fun. We'll get our 6,000+ people in here, and we'll have those students. And I think just people are excited to see like a team like Wisconsin come in, just like when Minnesota comes in or North Dakota comes in. There's certain teams people get excited about, so are real excited about, and Wisconsin's one of them. So it should be a fun weekend, and it should be a fun atmosphere.
Well, I would encourage anybody listening, if for whatever reason during the hockey season you happen to be in the state of Minnesota, check the Bulldogs schedule. If you can make I think it's about a 2.5 hour drive from the cities up north. I think it's a very unique place, not just to watch a hockey game, but just experience a incredibly rich hockey culture. And just to wrap up here, Scott, just in doing research for this, one thing that stood out to me is, a lot of the players that have come through your program that we've referenced, grew up in Minnesota, and a lot of your assistant coaches who have gone on, they're Minnesota born and raised. They play in the high school league there, which is I think a very unique experience relative to maybe where other kids, where they grew up playing hockey. And you're a second round pick of the Montreal Canadiens. You spent some time there. You spend one season in Philly as a player. Your last year as a pro, you play one game with the Minnesota North Stars. You grow up in Hibbing, Minnesota, which I've heard you reference as, I think it's the Plains, which I'm trying to get the geography right there. But can you just maybe touch, and I know this is a very broad question, but, just growing up in small town Minnesota, winning a state championship in high school, getting a chance to go pull on that North Stars jersey, like just how special is that? Just, I think, given the culture for hockey that exists in your state.
Yeah, it was like I grew up in Hibbing, and just town of about, at that time, 25,000 people. Home of Kevin McHale, Boston Celtics.
Yeah.
Bob Dylan, and
Really?
so there's a
No
couple. Bob
kidding.
was Hibbing and Duluth. So, but
So there's probably
no,
a
it was
statue of all three of you guys, like when you roll into town, right?
yeah, Micheletti family. So we had a lot of we have a lot of popular people. Not a lot, but a few that have come out of Hibbing, and it's kind of the hub of the Iron Range. It was a mining towns up there, and that was kind of the work for everybody. But it was a lot of just smaller communities. It's amazing how many really good hockey players came out of that area. And even for me, like growing up at the time, the numbers were better because the jobs were better. So the competition was awesome. Like we had 4 players off our high school team get drafted that year.
Come on.
That's so that was pretty cool to have that. And we did make it to the state tournament, which is by far probably the best sporting event in the country for amateurs. I think it's
I've heard that.
Back then too, we were playing at the old St. Paul Civic Center. Used to be way back at the Met Center before that was knocked down. So, and there wasn't a 2-class system then, right? It was just everybody battled everybody, and the top 8 teams made it.
So kind of like Hoosiers.
Pretty much, and
Yeah.
so you had some smaller schools going against the bigger schools if you made it. So we ended up making it, taking 3rd place my last year. But it's just a tremendous event. But if you could ever attend it, for people, you gotta see it to believe it, because it's something every kid in the state dreams of getting to, and being a part of, and we did that. But no, it's a great area up here, and Duluth was a big city for me when I grew up. This was, hey, let's go to Duluth. But I grew up watching the Bulldogs. I grew up watching the Gophers. We obviously had, those are the 2 prominent programs in our state. Before now, you look at it, we've got 6 programs in our state. So it's great to see the growth. But and we try and get whatever kids we feel are the right fit here. But getting northern Minnesota kids for us is really important. People love watching those players move on from high school to college to hopefully pro. And like I said, we've been lucky to have an area where we have had a lot of good players to pick from, whether it's here in Duluth or where it's up on the range. But it's not strictly where we go, but it's certainly important for our program, because it does bring people love to watch those kids. And that kind of tells you about the uniqueness of Minnesota hockey, right? People they follow it. They're into it. I even said when I played up in Canada, I said, Minnesota's really close to Canada as far as the way they treat hockey. So we live in a special state, and if people ever get to Duluth, hopefully they'll enjoy it.
Well, like I said, I know they will. And listen, Coach, you've built a really special program up there, and really appreciate you taking time to share a little bit about your process and how you've established so much success up there. And best of luck to you and the Bulldogs this year. We'll be watching.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Thanks for having me on. Love the coach's site, and love what you do too. So keep doing it. Hopefully we'll see you down the road.
The Glass and Out podcast is a The Coach's Site production.